In today's video, we're going to cover one of the more interesting characters that doesn't actually have a war scroll. He's like strictly a lore hero. Torglug the Despised, also known as Tornus the Redeemed. And we'll cover what we know of him in his mortal life, his fall to Nurgle, and his redemption in the eyes of Sigmar. And so let's follow this epic hero's life in kind of a chronological order. This is pieced together from the Realmgate Wars series, as well as the various battle tomes of MacLeod of Nurgle and Stormcast Eternals. So this champion's life began as Tornus of the Everdawn tribe, a tribe of humans settled deep in the heart of Ghyran, Realm of Life. Their holy mission, appointed by the goddess Alariel, was to defend a set of sacred water springs known as the Life Wells. So it seems as though she kind of fostered this civilization to be planted here as kind of the sole caretakers, the gardeners, and the kind of the watchmen of this spring. The Life Wells basically poured water into Ghyran that was rich in life magic, making it incredibly verdant and vibrant with life. Now, we have no idea how large the tribe was. I kind of imagine it being somewhat large, given that they were tasked with defending such an important place. And as for a timeline, that's also hard to gauge, because it could be at the end of the Age of Myth, or right at the beginning of the Age of Chaos, a little bit more recent. We don't really have an exact timetable, but we do know that when Nurgle came into the area, things fell apart very quickly. Sensing this huge, bursting of life magic, Nurgle forces were drawn immediately to the Life Wells. But again, we don't know how early or late that was in the Age of Chaos. That's important to note because it means that Tornus, could be hundreds of years old after all these transformations that we're going to talk about here in a moment. Regardless, when Nurgle came to the Everdawn tribe, the slaughter was brutal. Tornus fought his best, acting as sort of a brave warrior of his tribe, but the tide of corruption was too much for his people to bear. His tribe was smashed, and Tornus was taken prisoner. So why was Tornus captured and not killed like the rest of his people? Well, I imagine the forces that got him thought it's good to twist a native, someone who knows the realm better than any other. Because remember, as the forces of Nurgle are entering Ghyran, they're strangers in a strange land. They don't know everything, but if they can get a native on their side, they can learn so much more about just the place that they're wandering through. And with this, Tornus was tossed into what's called a pit of filth. Along with every manner of foulness the Nurgle host could find, is the exact quote. So basically what you have is a torture chamber built into the ground. And we've talked about the plagues of Nurgle before, and I'll link to the whole week we spent talking about the MacLeod of Nurgle, which is where we were first introduced to this character, in the links down below. But that Nurgle's diseases, they're not just illnesses to the body, but they're somehow supernatural in nature, able to torment the body and the soul. And Tornus hung in there for a while, knowing that calling out to Nurgle was his only chance for survival. For 76 days, Tornus retched in agony, and on the 77th, he gave in. Like a maggot squirming from a carcass, so too did this new champion, now known as Torglug the Despised, crawl from the pit of filth. He was transformed, imbued with the gifts and power of Nurgle himself. To prove his loyalty and assure his place of power, he was given a single mission: corrupt that which his entire family and tribe had spent defending. Poison the Life Wells themselves. And so for this act of loyalty, he was rewarded, elevated to being a champion of Nurgle. In model-wise, we would call him a Lord of Plagues, and he was known as the Huntsman of Nurgle, and given an entourage of Blight Kings beneath him. So his rise was quick and brutal, and Torglug became a feared and despised weapon of Nurgle, hence his name, of course. In his former life, he knew the lands of Ghyran very well, like where the rivers flowed, where other tribes and people were, the groves of the Sylvaneth, mighty oceans, dense forests, and many hidden paths to get to each and every one of them. And all that experience and information became a dagger in the back of the forces of order in Ghyran. Again, this is why Nurgle wanted someone who was local on his side. Now, because we don't have an exact timeline, we lose him for a bit, and we pick back up during the Realmgate Wars. We can assume it's been a bit of time in between these two things because he has kind of built up this big reputation. And so we're going to fast forward to the Realmgate Wars series. I did a whole week of content on this. I really do suggest you go watch it, but I'm going to fast forward a little bit. The Hallowed Knights of the Stormcast Eternals are in Gurran looking for Alariel, the goddess of life. They meet some Sylvaneth who know where she's at, and Torglug watches and hunts them. The party is led to Athelweird, a little pocket realm in Gurran, and a final bastion of life magic hidden from Nurgle, who is also seeking Alariel. Well, while the Stormcast Eternals are speaking with a despondent goddess of life, Torglug, as part of a Nurgle host, invades Athelweird. Alariel expends her energy defending the forces of order and reverts to her little seed pod, or soul pod I should say. And the Stormcast Eternals go on a merry chase to plant her in a place free of corruption. A lot of this is in the book Balance of Power, is dedicated to Torglug chasing down the Sylvaneth and Stormcast combined party, trying to capture the soul pod of Alariel. And he kind of becomes the perfect villain in this chase because he knows all these secret passages and back doors. He's constantly on their heels, taunting, hunting, and pursuing. Again, I'm simplifying all this. It was a really cool story. Go see my Realmgate Wars videos in the link down below. This chase culminates in an epic mountaintop battle between Torglug and his Rotbringer forces and the combined arms of Sylvaneth and Stormcast Eternals. And hope is pretty much lost for the good guys until the Celestant Prime shows up. It's a super dramatic scene. He comes in like a wrecking ball, and he's basically just like this tornado of death. He one-shot, one-kills a bunch of Blight Kings. Really cool scene. And the Celestant Prime takes Galmaraz, the Hammer of Sigmar, and lands this like insta-kill blow straight into Torglug's head. But instead of turning to pulp and red mist like everyone else did, instead there is this arc of lightning that fires up into the sky from the place where Torglug stood. And it was a little bit of a cliffhanger, and so this is how we enter the third and current part of this poor soul's life. Galmaraz is not just a weapon of destruction, but of judgment, of building. Upon striking the Lord of Plagues, Sigmar saw the kernel of the man within him, that tiny bit of Tornus that was trapped in the wretched body of Torglug. That kernel was judged worthy. His soul was swept away to Azir to be reforged. The Azir lightning on the Anvil of Apotheosis burned away all of the foul corruption, turning that dying ember of honor into a raging inferno of vengeance and faith. And thus, Torglug the Despised became Tornus the Redeemed. Now a Knight Venator of the Hallowed Knights, part of the very same chamber he was so keen to destroy. And in that role, he's been mentioned a few times here or there, featuring in the rest of the Realmgate Wars series, assisting Alariel in retaking the Genesis Gate. He also plays a big role in the book Plague Garden, but he hasn't appeared really in the Soul Wars story arc at all yet. So what makes Tornus, or Torglug, so cool? I'm going to use those names interchangeably, they're the same person. Well, he has a lot going on. I'm super interested in the mortals of each realm. Like, I want to know everything about the tribe that he was in, what humans look like after being shaped by the realms, right? And an origin and fall book would be amazing for this. Please, GW, make me that book about Torglug, or Tornus when he's a human, falling to becoming Torglug, right? The tragedy of turning a hero into a villain is epic, and how useful he was to Nurgle is just so evil and like dastardly. I just love it. And that's why he makes an incredible bad guy during the Realmgate Wars series. And of course, the biggest thing about Torglug and Tornus is the redemption story, right? He isn't unique. The Stormcast Eternal Battle Tome states that the Celestant Prime has done this to other villains. He's turned them into Stormcast. Like Sigmar's constantly judging souls that he takes out. But he's the only one we have any real detail on. Right, in GW history, there's a lot of good guys going bad, but there's not a whole lot of redemption. It's not a common theme across Black Library novels. There might be a good guy who's disgraced and kind of regains his honor. That's kind of the upward arc, but not a truly evil villain becoming a paragon of good, right? That really sets him apart. And this begs the question on how many potential heroes the Stormcast Eternals have killed already. How does Sigmar peer into the deepest depths of a soul? It also means that Sigmar is still recruiting, and that's an interesting idea because he's already expending so much effort in creating these Stormcasts, but he's still recruiting actively, and that I mean it has to mean something to the mortals who are fighting. Like, maybe I'll get a chance to like live forever, and I won't die in this hell pit. If you're like a free people officer or something like that. Another interesting thing that's touched on in the book Plague Garden is why was he put in the Hallowed Knights, right? That last one is a question Tornus wrestles with, like I said, in Plague Garden. It could be a grim reminder of his previous ways. Like, Sigmar wanted him to have a constant reminder of, you were trying to kill these guys, but I have redeemed you, right? And so it kind of has a negative tone to it, right? Because constant aching reminder of bad things you've done. Or another view that is expressed in that book is it could be because their faith is meant to keep him on the straight path. That's a little bit more of the positive angle, where Sigmar was like, it was just a kernel of a good man, and I want to foster that, so I'm going to put him with the most devout and faithful and encouraging chamber that I have, which would be the Hallowed Knights. Regardless, there's a bit of tension that goes unspoken. And it's interesting because Sigmar directly addresses this as like, if you are not on board with me redeeming Chaos Warriors, you're questioning my judgment, and I'm not cool with that. And yet some Stormcasts do it. There's no like open hostility or open rejecting of Tornus, because to do so would blatantly say that Sigmar's wrong, you don't trust him, which of course in the most faithful chamber there is, that's not going to happen. But he is held at an arm's reach. He doesn't have the same camaraderie as others. He didn't die in some grand act of faith like the rest of the Hallowed Knights did. He's not necessarily on the same page as them. So this all puts him at a kind of interesting distance from his brothers. And Plague Garden gives us a really great insight into kind of the inner workings of Tornus' mind. So for example, there's a point where the Stormcasts are in this kind of library where everyone recounts the details of their mortal lives to kind of keep them in case they lose their memory. So this way, like, no information is lost, you just have to rediscover who you were. Well, Tornus is looking at that kind of ceremony where everyone else is kind of reveres it, and he's dreading it because obviously his life is full of terrible things, like terrible things. And he's constantly asking, like, how come they lose their memories, but I keep all the memories of the screams of the innocent people that perished by my hands. And so again, kind of questioning, well, is this a punishment, like a reminder? Is it intentional? He's not quite sure. And so there's a lot of great internal conflict with this character as he kind of wrestles with insecurity, which is great for, those internal tensions are fantastic for Stormcast, I think. But also how that relates to everyone around him not having that is pretty fantastic. And so, friends, that will conclude the video on Torglug and Tornus. I do hope he shows back up, kind of like a lot of the heroes that showed up in the first arc of Age of Sigmar kind of just fell by the wayside. So you have like Vandus Hammerhand, Gorgus Cold, those kinds of things. I want to see more from Tornus. He's a very interesting character because he has such a unique position in Stormcast Eternal, specifically the Hallowed Knights. And I would like to see that kind of explored in a little bit more detail. I'd also love to see an origin story book or series about him and his fall and what he was like, because they built up this kind of persona they had for him so intensely. I think there's a lot of cool things that could happen there. And so I'm curious, what are your thoughts on that? Would you be interested in seeing a Torglug origin story, or you're just like, let's keep on moving, no reason to look backward? Leave in the comments below, and thank you all so much for watching. I look forward to seeing you in my next Age of Sigmar lore video. Happy wargaming. Hey Wargamers, Doug here. If you like the show, help the channel grow. Consider becoming one of my patrons over on Patreon. My patrons are vital to help decide the direction of the channel, and patrons of a certain level are automatically entered to win whatever battle tome I just finished reviewing. And I'll ship it anywhere worldwide. But more than that, it's an invitation to be part of a great group that wants to serve the wargaming community as a whole. Click the link in the description down below and you'll be brought over to my Patreon page, which is bursting with helpful information and will answer a lot of questions you may have. For as little as $1 a month, you can support me and make this channel possible. Thank you all so much for your consideration, and happy wargaming.